Welcome to episode number 11 of the Hike Files podcast. I'm your host, Kurt Zitzelman. What's going on? It's that time of year again. Summer's over. Fall's here. Autumn is here. The days are getting cooler. The nights are getting longer. I'm super excited about it. But a weird thing also starts to happen. People start vanishing from the woods. And it's nothing paranormal. It is the fact that they don't have a very crucial piece of gear. They don't have their year-round outdoor permit. We're going to talk about how to get that in this episode of the Hike Files podcast. The year-round outdoor permit is completely bogus. I made it up. It's just in my mind. But I think it needs to be. The year-round outdoor permit it's a state of mind. You have to be okay with being outdoors with the colder weather, with the longer nights. It starts a mind game with you. So I'm going to talk about a couple things I do to prepare, and maybe they'll help you prepare. And I'll talk about a couple of my favorite cool weather experiences that I've had. So for me, in the summer, in the warm weather, I focus more on planning the hike. Because that's where you're going to be spending most of your time, I think, in the summer. At least for me. I'm going to get to the trail as early as I can. I'm going to hike as long as I can. Then I'm going to get to camp. And I'm going to eat some food, go to sleep, wake up, and do it all over again. In the fall, though, that starts to change. Because those nighttime hours start to get longer. And then as we hit daylight savings, or the end of daylight savings, those night hours get even longer. The hike isn't as important because I'm not going to be spending as much time on the trail. So I start to focus more on my comfort on the trail. And a lot of that has to do with staying warm, staying dry. And those are tied together more than you would think. So staying warm is important because as it's colder, some of the key factors for warm and dry. Layers, very important. You don't want to wear just one big bulky jacket to stay warm because as you move and your core temperature starts to go up, you're going to want to gradually adjust your outer layer. All right. And if you just have one outer layer, it's either on or off. So you're either going to go from extreme to extreme. So with layers, you can be just as warm, even warmer, because it's not the jacket that keeps you warm. It's not the individual layers of fabric that keep you warm. It's the air that those things trap that keeps you warm. That's the insulation. So you can adjust your layers by taking layers off or rolling up sleeves or unzipping a layer, something like that. Much easier than you can with one bulky jacket. And if you notice in my videos, in my fall and winter videos, I do that quite often. A lot of times I'll have my hat curled up, my beanie curled up to help adjust like the heat that's escaping my head. Just little things like that. And you'll learn tricks for yourself that work. But keeping your body temperature regulated keeps you hopefully from sweating. And that's where the material that you use for your layers becomes very important. Cotton is no good when you're hiking. It does absorb the moisture from your body, and so does things like wool, synthetic fibers like polyester. But cotton has a really hard time evaporating that out. It collects it, but it doesn't want to pass it through to the atmosphere, where wool and synthetic fibers generally will, quick dry fibers will, allow that to transfer the moisture right out of it, waking it away, and then drying themselves very quickly. Because what will happen is if you're wearing cotton and it stays wet, you get to camp. Now you sit down, even if you're sitting at a fire, you're going to, your core temperature is going to start to drop a little bit. Those damp clothes, those wet clothes, they're actually cold, and thermodynamics dictates that heat, that energy goes from high to low. So those clothes are going to start drawing the heat out of your body. your body's going to have to fight even harder to stay warm. And at some point, you lose that battle and then you go into hypothermia. So cotton, I'm not saying that you can't get hypothermia if you're wearing wool or polyester. I'm just saying cotton is going to get you there a lot quicker. I always tell people, steer clear of cotton as much as you can in the winter, in the fall. Just don't even bring it. I don't always listen to myself, and sometimes I'll wear like a cotton t-shirt in between layers of polyester or wool. It doesn't really help, but it does. Do as I say, not as I do. It's never a good idea to wear cotton. I'm getting better at that. And then staying dry and wearing layers only works if your body is generating heat. You're the heat source, not your clothes, not your dryness, not the insulation. You are the generator. You're the furnace. So in order to generate heat, you have to be intaking calories. And these are all the things I think about. Maybe not in those terms when I'm planning, but I'm thinking about staying dry and I'm thinking about keeping my calories up. I bring different foods that are a little higher in fat, and things are a little bit, got a little higher fat content, a little higher calorie content. I bring a lot more snacks. So even at night, if I get up to pee, I have a little snack. The colder it is, the more I snack, because that intake of calories gives your body fuel to burn to create heat. Gives your body fuel to burn to create heat. Super important. And then, of course, when you're dry, your body doesn't have to fight as hard to stay warm. So those calories last a little bit longer. And then as far as the camp itself, I usually start thinking more about bringing a saw or an axe. I'll carry a chair more often, like a legit chair. I might be less concerned about carrying the bear canister because you're going to have less wildlife out. You're not guaranteed to always not have wildlife in the winter, but it's going to be less likely. So the chair will start making an appearance more than the bear canister. I'll make sure I've got a spare headlamp because there's going to be more chance of me needing a headlamp. And if one dies, and they're going to back up. Just little things like that. Other gear that I pay more attention to, just waterproofing. Again, to stay dry and stay warm. Waterproof socks, waterproof windbreaker, things like that. Just the extra gear that I don't generally carry in the summer because you're not as worried about it. If you get wet in the summer, even once you get to camp, you really want to dry off. You could have a small fire and it'd be enough to dry your clothes. It's not a big deal if you're wet. You might be a little uncomfortable in the summer, but you're not in as great a danger as getting hypothermia as you are in the winter. And even though you're trying not to sweat, one of the big concerns that I try to make people aware of is, even though you're trying not to sweat as much, you're losing more water than you think. So hydration is really important in the winter as well. So there's a lot to keep. You got to keep all these kind of balls in the air in the cold weather without really thinking about it. Staying dry, not sweating, but still staying hydrated. Eating, keeping your calories up, not getting too hot, not getting too cold, making sure you got your fire kit, making sure you've got an extra, make sure you got all your insulation, all your layers. You're not stepping in any puddles. It's a lot. It's worth it. I think so. The other thing gear-wise, actually maybe not even gear-wise, but just trail-wise, things get slippery in the fall. You got a lot of leaves that are down. And as they start to decay, they get slippery. You've got moss and lichen and things like that on the rocks that start to decay a little bit. And they get a little slippery. Water crossings, things that are generally a little damp, will get like an algae on them. And that's slippery in itself. But when it starts to break down in the fall, it gets even more slippery. So you really got to start watching your footing. Under those leaves that are falling, those beautiful colored leaves, there could be rocks, which are probably wet because they're under leaves, and that's slippery. Everything gets slippery. I'll hike more with trekking poles in the fall, just because I know things are slippery, and you might not be able to see the rocks There could be holes in the ground that you can't see because there's leaves on them. It's a little dangerous. Now that I'm saying all this, cold weather is dangerous. It's sketchy out there, but don't be afraid. If you're prepared, then you'll be fine. And start small. So those are the things I start to adjust as the weather gets cold. In the summer, you can be a little more haphazard. I forgot my rain gear, no big deal. Oh, okay, so my shirt's wet and it's not drying. No big deal. When you get in the hammock or tent, you just take your shirt off. You hang it up on your ridgeline and let it dry. Or if it's not completely dry in the morning, who cares? It's going to get sweaty anyway because it's hot and it's humid. Once those temperatures start dropping, you got to pay a lot more attention to that stuff. And again, none of this is meant to scare you, but you just need to be prepared for them. Probably in all these, there's no order of importance on these. They're all just as important. But the last thing I'll touch on is I pay a lot more attention to the weather. I pay attention to wind. I pay attention to precipitation. I pay attention to humidity. I pay attention to temperature. I will watch, and normally even in the summer, I look at 2 to 4 different weather service predictions, forecasts. I'll look at like my normal widget that's on my phone. It's just the Google Android weather app. I'll look at that gives me a good base, and I'll start looking at this days in advance. As soon as, if I know I'm going on a trip, even if it's just an overnighter, as soon as I know, or as soon as that day comes up, like the 10-day weather, as soon as that day comes up and I can see it, even before that, I'll start looking at the weather before that day and for a week in advance. And I'll watch and see if there's a storm predicted. I will see if it's moving towards the date I'm going or away from the date I'm going. Is it getting more severe? Is it getting less severe? What's going on with that? And then I just keep watching that. And then the closer I get, I start looking at that, and I've got the Weather Underground app on my phone. I'll use that for the radar. Sometimes I'll look at like the Weather Channel. Very rarely do I use that anymore, the Weather Channel app. But the one that I've really started to like, it's not even an app, it's just a web page. It's the NOAA.gov. Is it NOAA.gov? Let me look at that real quick and verify for you so I can give you the right information. .gov. And up in the top, it'll have a little search bar. Nope. It has a little bar where you can search for your local weather. You put in your zip code or your town, and it will give you really in-depth weather. And it's probably the most accurate I've seen, especially day of. Like day before, day of, that their weather is really accurate. Others, not so much. And then, of course, there's always things like just like the local news or local radio. Their weather is it's about as accurate as my like go-to, my everyday weather app. It's hit or miss. They can tell you it's sunny out and it's pouring rain and vice versa, and you never know if it's going to be accurate or not. That's why I try to look at it in advance and then average out what the weather's going to do as I get closer to that day. But the key thing I look for, especially because I hammock so much, is that wind. In the winter, the wind, even in the summer, the wind can be bad, but trees with leaves break the wind a lot better than trees without leaves. And if it's going to be windy and cold, you can get ice forming in the branches of trees and they'll explode, especially if the temperature drops really fast. So last Christmas, I usually do my Christmas Eve backpacking trip, and I postponed it until January this year because it dropped so much so quickly. I could just imagine trees exploding left and right. And when I went out, like later on that week, there were so many down branches on trails, and I thought, yep, there was a little bit of wind, and that knocked a lot of them down, but a lot of that was probably ice crystals forming in the branches and just popping the branches right off the trees. So it's things like that you got to watch for in the weather. And again, it's just, you've got to judge it Gauge it by your comfort level. But for me, if I think there could be branches just falling from the sky, I'm going to probably not go. It's one thing when you're on foot, when you're moving and you're already mobile, but when you're in a hammock or a tent, you can't get out of the way quick enough. And that's why they call them widow makers, because you don't even know it's coming and it just lands on you. I've had branches fall on me in a hammock. I actually watched one fall on me in Kentucky and I deflected it with my tarp. There's nothing you can do. As soon as it's moving towards you, it's hit you. And it was dark. I was looking up, my headlamp was on, and I heard it fall. And by the time I saw it was going to hit me, it was too late. And I just stuck my hand up. My tarp had come loose in the sand and I was holding the tarp in my hand to keep it from rattling. And I just stuck it up like a shield. And luckily it didn't pop through the tarp, but it could have. It would have been just as bad. It wouldn't have slowed it down that much if it would have gone through. And that was just a spur of the moment storm that happened. Like it just hit. And again, I know a lot of this sounds a little scary and I'm not trying to scare you, but things you need to be prepared for. So those are the things I look at the most as the weather changes. Some of my favorite experiences though, camping and backpacking, have been in the fall. Maine, my first trip up to Acadia, which I talked about a few episodes ago when I did the Beehive. We had a really weird year here in Pennsylvania as far as fall colors. We had this really big pop and the trees all changed and it was really vivid for about a day. And then this really bad windstorm blew through and just knocked all the leaves down. And that was it. It was over. They were there. You blinked, they were gone. And I thought, oh man, I was really looking forward to seeing those colors as I was driving up to Maine. And I left PA early on a Friday morning, like super early. And I got to the Connecticut River and I decided to stop. There's this little state park there called Eagle Landing State Park in Connecticut. And I passed it and I saw it was a state park and I thought, oh, the sun's about ready to come up. Let me stop there. I was headed to Gillette Castle State Park, but I didn't know if it would be open. I wasn't sure. They had the hours of operation were like 8 till whenever. And I'm like, I don't know if they got a gate. I don't know if they got locked. I don't know if it's like in PA where it'd just be open. It's just the office wouldn't be open. So I drove by this Eagle Landing State Park and it's right on the river. So it's like a riverfront park and there's like a boat launch there and the gate was open. I thought, I know that one's open. So I turned around, I went back and I had a Pop-Tart and a bottle of orange juice or something like that. And I walked out on one of the fishing piers. I'm just standing there and it's just light enough you can see the sun is just about ready to come up. And I remember looking to my right down the river because I just saw this bright red. And I turned and it just was the right day at the right time. And like one ray of sun was just coming through the channel where the river is because it turned just south of me and the sun was coming up right in the right spot. And there was this gigantic maple down on that bend on my side of the river and it just lit up like fire. It was this red. And it was one of those, it was like a little sign of, yeah, you're doing the right thing. This is the right trip to be on today. And as the sun came up, I could see all the color. So that day I wound up in Connecticut at the Eagle Landing State Park, at Gillette Castle State Park, and at Rocky Neck State Park in Connecticut. And Rocky Neck is right on the shore. And Gillette Castle State Park, that was just all fall colors. It was incredible. All reds and yellows and oranges. Rocky Neck was sandy. There were some trees. But when I left there, I was heading to Massachusetts to stay the first night. And I went through Rhode Island and I wanted to hike in Rhode Island. I went to hike in all the New England states. So when I got to Rhode Island, I hiked at Snake Den State Park. And I had a hard time finding it first. But once I got there and I got on the trail and I started going, and it was like this old farm field, but all around the farm field was like red and orange, and it was just this blue sky and this green grass and all these colors in the trees. And I just followed the colors all the way up to Acadia. And when I got to Acadia, there's a couple people like, "Oh, you missed peak," but it was pretty colorful. If that wasn't peak, I can only imagine what peak looked like. So that was an incredible trip with all these incredible colors. And as I was leaving, it was all starting to fade. So I just happened to be there at the right time to catch all those colors. It was really cool. So yeah, definitely one of my favorite autumn trips. And then another one would be, even though the colors weren't as amazing, it was getting there. And that was last year on the Quehanna Trail. There was some color in the trees, but it was the high grasses and the ferns and the lower shrubs, the blueberries and the things like that, that were changing ahead of the trees. And it just gave everything this really orange, almost surreal look. And even with the rain, it was a rainy trip. It rained on the first day and it rained on the last two. But it was just these beautiful days that were in the 70s. It wasn't too hot. It wasn't too cold. Even the day it was raining, I think it was in the main day it was raining. That was like a Sunday. It was in the 60s, high 60s. So it wasn't that bad. Just cool enough that my rain gear wasn't overheating me. But you have that autumn smell. There was nobody. I saw very few people out on that trail, and there was 3 days where I didn't see a single soul. The colors of the underbrush and the smell of autumn and the cooler nights and the warm days, and it was just incredible. I want to be out there right now. I don't like doing the same trip back to back like that. Like, I don't want that to be my autumn trip every year. Like, I would love to go to Maine every year, but I don't want to do the same thing every year. But, oh man, I love that. It was incredible. Absolutely loved it. Just the whole package, that change in season, the autumn smell and the colors, the crunchiness of the leaves as you're hiking. It's something. I really love that aspect of it. And then it was just a moment. This is just a really cool moment I had on a fall trip. Again, it was fall, so it was around this time of year. It might have been a little bit later. Might have been October. No, it was in September. It was in September. So another one, this is just a moment on the trip. It was over in Pinchot, which is my local state forest. I was just doing the North Loop. I don't know if I was doing the full loop. I think I made my own path through. Like, I went up across the top of the hill and was coming around. And on the second day, I got up really early. And I don't know why. Like, I usually get up early, but I got up really early. And I was just like, you know what? I'm going to pack down. I'm going to go. So I packed my gear up and I hit the trail before the sun came up. And as I got to this one section that's kind of blueberry bushes and maple trees mixed with some oaks, it was a little foggy. All the blueberry bushes had turned red, and the maples they weren't sugar maples. They were silver maples, or what are they called? But the leaves turn yellow. So the birches and the maples and the orange, the oaks. And I'm just standing on the trail, and it's just all these colors, and the sun had just come up, and it was just hitting everything just right. And for the longest time, that was my background on my computer. It was just it looked like a painting. It was incredible. You could actually see, because of the fogginess, you could actually see the beams of sunlight, the sunbeams coming through the forest. And the dew was glistening on the trees and the leaves, and oh my God. Just these little things. And I took a picture of it, but the picture never does it justice. But every once in a while, I'll see something similar to that, and it'll just make me think of hiking and camping and backpacking in the fall. If you've never done it, if you think summer's over, I don't like being out when it's cold, I encourage you to try. get some warmer gear, take some of the precautions, wear the layers, eat the calories, get a little bit bigger backpack. And I have a summer pack, I have a winter pack, like a 3-season pack and my winter pack. In the fall and in the spring, if I'm just looking for comfort, I'll grab the winter pack. I don't care. It's a little bit heavier to carry all that stuff. I'll take my time and I'll do it slower. I don't care. Just for those experiences. It's incredible. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed me babbling about autumn. I guess that's what this podcast is. It's just me babbling about the outdoors. I have been trying to get some guests on, but I've been running into this issue of people saying, oh, I've done this and I've done this outdoors, and I'd love to talk about it. And also tell your audience about my self-help thing or my motivational speech. And this is entertainment. This and Primitive Intelligence, they're entertainment podcasts. They're not, yeah, you might learn something and you might find it interesting, but I'm not trying to tell you anything. I'm just talking. It's just a podcast just for entertainment. There's a lot of podcast stuff out there that apparently is just geared at telling you how to live your life. I will give you advice. I'll tell you how I do things. Never take anything I say as the absolute gospel of outdoors. I'm just a guy who likes to be outside, and I'll pass on my knowledge and my experience. And if you learn something from it, great. But by and large, this is all for entertainment. So as I've been seeing these air quotes outdoors people try to peddle their self-help program, I've been skipping them and ignoring them. I'm not going to burden you guys with that. That's not why you listen to this. You listen for apparently me babbling about the outdoors. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you do have something that an experience you've had on a trail or outdoors, or something that you'd like to talk about, reach out to me at hike.files@gmail.com. We'll set something up. We can do a video chat or whatever, and we can have you on the show and you can discuss and we can talk and we can babble together. That's going to do it for this episode of Hike Files Podcast. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Go outside, enjoy the fall, and I'll talk to you in the next episode of Hike Files Podcast.